So today's presentation is part of the storytelling series, which we run in partnership with Community Living Dufferin. And we have Kathy Hall, who is our partner at Community Living, on the call with us today. It is said that stories create community. They enable us to see through the eyes of other people, and they open us to the claims of others. And Kathy and I couldn't agree more. So thank you, Kathy and Community Living Dufferin, for helping us put on this presentation today. So today we are thrilled to host Master Warrant Officer Charles Simpson and Sergeant Daryl Janssen. Master Warrant Officer Charles Simpson has served with the military for over 37 years, having started at only 19 years old. He retired in 2007 with the following honors and awards: the Canadian Forces Decoration, Second Class, the Egypt Medal, Cyprus Medal, Golden Heights Medal, the Golden Jubilee Medal, and the Peacekeepers Medal. Upon retirement from the forces, Officer Simpson and his wife Susan moved to Orangeville, where he became a member of the Orangeville Legion and has since held a number of positions, including Sergeant at Arms and Vice President. And you might see Master Warrant Officer Charles out canvassing for the Poppy campaign. I ran into him at Sobeys the other day, but I hear he's headed to Walmart next. Sergeant Daryl Janssen joined the Canadian Armed Forces as a signal operator, also at 19 years old. He deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2007, working with the Operational Mentoring and Liaison Team, and he was employed as a vehicle gunner and a radio operator. Sergeant Janssen deployed a second time as a member of the Counter Improvised Explosives Team, and he was employed as a radio-controlled IED specialist. He is currently working with the Primary Reserve, the 31 Signal Regiment out of Hamilton, while he completes his degree in Religious Studies at McMaster University. So thank you so much to the two of you for joining us today and for giving our community a chance to commemorate Remembrance Day, especially during a time where a lot of us won't be able to attend Remembrance Day services. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sergeant Janssen, to give your presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having us here today, Shannon, and thanks for facilitating this. I'm just going to get my PowerPoint started here. Everybody see that okay?
Yep, looks good to me.
All right. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi, everybody. My name is Sergeant Daryl Janssen, and I'm going to quickly speak to you about my journey with the Canadian Armed Forces. So what I've done is very, very simple PowerPoint presentation featuring a bunch of photos. And so here, as you can see, me in basic training all the way up to me just last year in Meaford, Ontario, instructing a primary leadership qualification course, right? My journey. So the first chapter of the military journey starts with training. From December 2004, when I enrolled in the Canadian Forces, until about 2006, I was pretty much consistently training, starting in BMQ in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, and then moving on to my soldier qualification in Meaford, driver training in Borden, and my trade qualification in Kingston, Ontario. Upon my arrival at 2CMBG, I was fascinated to learn that despite my recently minted qualifications, all we did was keep training. That's it. We trained all the time. From 2006, when I first got posted to the 2nd Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group Headquarters and Signal Squadron, until my first deployment in February 2007, I would spend most of the year training or asked to support training operations. The first picture there is I did General Duty's Kitchen, one of my first tasks, about 3 months in Wainwright, Alberta. Fun stuff. The Army's not always fun and glory. Task Force 110. My first deployment was with the Omelette, where I would be employed primarily as a vehicle gunner and a section signaler. My day-to-day routine would ensure that our communication equipment was operating properly, and that my weapon and my weapon and the remote system with which it was operated were functioning properly. The first photo in this series is a picture of, it's actually behind, it's the chair that I would sit in for any time we were on the road, which was a lot of the time. You can see there's the joystick there, and then that's the gunner screen. It's looking at what the weapon system is looking at. So it's not, it's not like the old days where you're behind this big gun driving around. Chapter 4, Task Force Counter IED. Oh, wait a minute. Correction, sorry, I apologize. Yeah, that was right. I returned from my deployment in 110 or 107, and after a brief respite, was quickly tackling my next challenge. In late 2008, I was earmarked to deploy as a radio-controlled improvised explosive device defeat specialist, and began, you guessed it, training again. Specialist courses and training within the actual counter IED environment was extremely demanding, as you can guess. It was about a year and a half straight training every day. Seriously impacted my, especially my relationship during that time. But very important, right? Because what we're training to do is keep ourselves safe in one of the most dangerous environments on the battlefield, which is explosive ordnance disposal. Just different photos from that operation. Following from Task Force 110 and Canada's subsequent wind down in Afghanistan, I was posted to the medium heavy lift helicopter project, which would see the creation of the infrastructure and assets to house our CH-147F, the Chinook helicopter, which you can see in the first photo. Once we received the helicopters, I would be folded into the newly recreated 450 TAC Health Squadron operations cell for 2 years. I was then relocated to Kingston, Ontario, where I would work briefly with the Canadian Forces School of Communications and Electronics as a course director. And then I went to the Canadian Forces Joint Signals Regiment as the Division CP Sergeant before I ultimately retired from the Reg Force and came to 31 SIGs Regiment here again. Although the journey has been fun, as you can see, a lot of great opportunities. It's been informative, it's been exciting, it's been challenging, but it's never been easy and it's never been kind, unfortunately. In 2007, I would experience the profound heartache of losing a friend in combat, Matt McCully. Matt was killed by an IED, the same types of devices that my team would work to remove from the ground in 2010. In 2010, while I was working with counter IED, we would lose PO Craig Blake. He's in the photo there with me on the bottom left. The same thing to an IED as well. Just this year, in late April, a helicopter went down in the Mediterranean with another friend of mine on board and a bandmate of mine from when I was in Petawawa, Matthew Cousins. So it's tough, and you lose friends because that's the nature of the environment. On November 11th every year, I travel to Orangeville to visit the grave of Matt McCully, and I drink a Miller's Genuine Draft. It's my act of remembrance. As the world continues to change and as we continue to dissect, question, and redefine the histories and values that make us Canadian, it might become harder to remember the sacrifices of our soldiers without conflating their role with the political or social conditions which frame their. I want to take a moment to remind everyone that soldiers are not politicians, historians, or philosophers. We are asked to jump, and our only response is how high. It is easy to forget sometimes that the soldiers who pay the ultimate cost, who sacrifice themselves on a foreign battlefield, are only ever there for you, the Canadian citizen, who we trust to guide our politicians and lawmakers to make the best foreign policy decisions on your behalf. Here, in the mud of this commitment between the citizen and the soldier, is where our duty to remember, as Canadians, profoundly exists. The soldier is your shield and your sword, a comfortable afterthought in peacetime, and a blanket of security during war. Your sons or brothers, mothers, daughters, friends, and acquaintances who, without a moment hesitation, will sacrifice everything they have for you. That's the end of my presentation and the end of my journey with the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sergeant Janssen, for sharing that with us. And just before we go over to Charles, I'm glad that you shared, some of the photos from your time overseas, because it's hard for those of us as civilians to imagine what it's like and what the culture is like, what the climate is like when you're working over there. And I'm sure that people are going to have more questions for you afterwards during the Q&A.
Thanks again. I'm sorry, I'm not used to public speaking like that, so I get a little bit emotional. I apologize, but thank you for your time again.
No, that's okay. It's definitely an emotional time for sure. Master Warrant Officer Charles, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello there. Daryl, excellent presentation. I should have you doing mine. Much better at it than me. So, good day, folks. My name is Charles Simpson. Just want to give you a little history of me. My start of life in the military goes back a little further than Daryl, so please bear with me, as you can tell by the beard. I was born in Kingston, Ontario, and that's about as it. I was actually raised on a little tiny island called Howe Island. It's in the middle of the St. Lawrence River, and it's a farming community, 65 farms. And from there, our family moved to Toronto, and that's where my life in the military started. 1969, way back there, 5 of us were in a group, and we actually were reading the Toronto Star, believe it or not. We're reading a paper in those days, and that's surprising. And the dead center of it was join the military. There's no life like it. So 5 of us went up to St. Clair Street, recruiting center, went through all the tests and all that, and the captain was very polite to us and all that. And he said, all right, you guys go away. We'll send you a letter if we want to join. So May of 70, 6 months later, I said, oh, they all forget it. And a letter showed up. I said, would you like to continue? And up I went, and I signed up that day on the 13th of May, 1970. The disposition of the gentleman who was really nice to us before I signed up was really thing. Afterwards, his attitude changed. So he laid it all down line, and I went from there to a place in Cornwallis. That's where we were trained, did my basic training. And when I came out of there, I thought I was going to go to the school in Kingston like Daryl did and get his trade. But we were sidetracked because of the FLQ crisis. And we were put into the position of providing security. Some groups went to Ottawa, some went everywhere else. We were recruits, but that was it. I went to Toronto at the CFB Toronto, and I was guarding weapons that were going to be destroyed. So I spent a couple of months during the FLQ crisis in Toronto, my first life, learning about the military and in that crisis in our history. From there, then I went to Kingston and did my trades training. My first posting was in Borden. Looking forward to that. They put me in a bunker, underground. I spent the next 6 years underground working out of a bunker, the Defense bunker. So if you ever want to know what that is, if you go to Borden, it's a Cold War leftover. I said, great. There, I went and did my first UN tour. I went to Egypt, and this was from the Yom Kippur War, 1974. UNF2, United Nations Emergency Force Number 2, was created. I was a young man of 23, thought it was exciting. Away I went, and I did dispatch, a DR. That's a dispatch writer, which means I was a mobile postman, delivering messages and everything all through the command and in the outdets and things like that. I also was a teletype operator, which is a little different than what Daryl was used to, but they taught me to be a radio operator. That was exciting, tuning 106 sets and things like that. So that was my first taste of overseas. The conflict was where I got a taste of how much I love my country. When you see the suffering and the destruction and it was still going on, they were still shooting at each other when we were there. Sometimes you'd be out there and you see flashes in the far distance, and you would say, what's that? Well, that's them having artillery duels. It's like a war movie. And you go, oh, okay, that's exciting. That gets reality checked real quick. So I come back to Canada, and that's where I met a very lovely young lady who was also happened to be in the military in the same place. And 8 months later, I married her. Her name is Susan, and we're still together after 46 years. Surprise. And from there, we got posted from Borden to Petawawa, to the SSF. That's a special surface force that used to exist. Too bad. But that's the old two combat mechanized group. And from there, I got my second tour. This is a Cyprus. And that history was between the Greeks and the Turk Cypriots. They had a disagreement. Well, they had a small war. So the UN went in and separated them again. So there I was doing what we used to call crypto. It was offline stuff, and we'll leave that at that. There was a specialized job in the communications world that I did for 6 months. It was again interesting, but I was newly married, and away I went. That's my first separation from my wife. So I come back, got back into Petawawa, And they sent me to Goose Bay, Labrador with a NATO base. So I got to know the Americans, the Germans, the Belgiques, the British. That was a 2-year posted isolation. If you think we get snow in Ontario, go to Goose Bay. You ain't seen nothing yet. So I come out of Goose Bay, went back to Borden, of all places, back to the bunker for another jolly tour of 6 years underground. From there, I went to the school in Kingston as I was an instructor of a communication system. Then I got posted to a reserve unit in St. John, Newfoundland. I was a regular force training advisor. I consider that my best tour of my whole career. I worked with another component of the military who were, these are, and I hate to use, it's an invalid term of part-time soldiers. These are the folks that have regular jobs. They call out, they train, and they are deployed with the armed forces. They are reserve members of the military. Great 3-year tour. From there, I went out to Esquimalt, BC, where I hung around with the Navy for 6 years. So I got a little taste of the other side. And we worked at a communication squadron with there, fixing their computers and things like that. All this time I'm moving up in the rank, you know, sergeant at the school in Kingston, warrant officer in Esquimalt. Then I got told, hey, you're being promoted to MWO. And I went, oh, so that's great. Where am I going? You're going to Ottawa. Okay. Being promoted, going to Ottawa wasn't a big thing. So I go to a squadron in Ottawa in NDHQ. And from there, I got my third and last tour as a troop sergeant major in the Golan Heights, where again, we're separated between two groups of people that don't really like each other. It's got to be the most heavily armed, fortified place I ever seen in my life. Everybody carries a gun, even civilians. No one walks around unarmed at all. It's just unbelievable, the tension that's there. There's minefields all over the place. There are what we consider terrorist outfits there. They're just everywhere. So you really had to watch your P&Qs. You got to watch where you're going. So I was a sergeant major of a SIGS troop of 27. So we kept the, this time we were doing the internet, the videos, and we took care of that, satellites, radios and all that. So I had a 27-man detachment deployed on the Israeli side and on the Syrian side. So it was basically doing the 2IC job, taking care of the men's and all that. So came back to Canada, did a few more years in Ottawa, and then I got, my last posting was a place called Leitrim. And it's a very unique place. Again, I'll just tell you, it's a very unique place, and we'll leave that at that. And I did a year and a bit, and I tried to go for a position. There was a master warrant officer's position in the northern part of Afghanistan. It wasn't down where Daryl was. I was a little higher up with the headquarters, but you had to compete for it. And I didn't win it. So I was disappointed. And my wife said, okay, it's time for us to go home. I was 55 years old. She said that was enough. So we retired to Orangeville. Next thing you know, I come down for Remembrance Day, where I met Daryl and his crowd, which was interesting. And I heard the history. And I said, this is really great. And then I've joined the Legion, and I've been a member ever since. So it never stops. The Legion has a saying, we are the keepers of remembrance. So whether our service person has gone, have not come back, or are serving, our job is to take care of our veterans and their families. So that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years. I've been the Sergeant at Arms, which I take care of the colors behind me if you see me. I have been the third vice and the first vice in the Legion here. And I've been taking care of the Poppy campaign for the last couple of years. And that's where we go out and we stand in the corner, put Poppy boxes out, and we seek donations so we can help a veteran. And they may need things like this. I'm going to do this. Believe it or not, I don't know if you can see it. The littlest, simplest thing is being able to hear. There are folks out there who cannot afford it. So through your Poppy donations, we can get hearing aids, glasses, help out medical, defibrillators, all sorts of things for hospitals and things like that. And that's what our mission is to be able to provide and support. So let's see what else. If I may have a look down here, my wife's name is Susan. She spent 22 years in the military. I have 2 sons and 2 grandchildren. The only experience, unfortunately, of loss of soul is back in Canada. People tend to forget when we have people deployed. Unfortunately, there is times when we've lost people. But what a lot of people forget about are we have lost people here in Canada. Deployment, training, and working, and I've had that. The fellow that replaced me when I went to Cyprus, he took over as the CO's driver, which I was. When I come back, he took the last exercise before I was going to return. And unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident up in Huntsville. If I had replaced him before, I think that's where my thought of my mind, that could have been me. But the biggest one overseas is when we lost the Buffalo in 1974. That's a military aircraft. The Syrians shot down a Buffalo and killed 9 Canadians. They were in this Buffalo. They hit them with 3 missiles and shot them down. And their excuse was they thought it was a fighter. They said it was a mistake. But those are the souls that I deployed. And unfortunately, there was a Simpson on that airplane. It scared the hell out of my dad until I phoned. And told them I was all right. So that's, sorry, as Daryl says, it gets emotional. So that, I think I'll end it there. So that's the history of me. And I hope it was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for sharing that. And I know it's very emotional for both of you to talk about your experience in the military. And I think it's important that you're sharing that, you know, even when we're not at active war or active duty, as it's referred to often in the media, that we're still, or that you're still on training missions, which can be very dangerous, right? Like Daryl was speaking to losing a friend in a training accident. That it's a very dangerous job and it's taking lots of risk just day to day in all of that training. And I think we often, you know, when the media is not talking about our Canadian forces, it's easy for civilians to then not think about them until Remembrance Day. So I wondered if you could share a little bit about maybe some of the active or current operations that are happening right now. So many of us don't realize that we do environmental missions, we have humanitarian missions. So I know our Canadian Forces members help with fisheries and just the legalization around that and making sure that everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen. I know we're stationed all over the world right now in different parts of the world on different missions, whether we're helping other militaries establish a military and teaching, whether that we're there with United Nations offering assistance. So maybe if you could just speak a little bit to that and what you know about right now with current duties around the world.
Well, unfortunately, I don't work for the Joint Operations Center, so I'm not in tune with every single thing that's going on. But the ones that I do know about, I know we've got a mission that's been going on for quite a while in the Ukraine, where I think we're doing both stability, but mostly training operations. We've got soldiers in Latvia. We've got soldiers in Iraq. And I know that we always maintain an active presence in certain places in Africa as part of different United Nations, United States, or NATO missions. We're very active with our international partners. And so even where you don't see big deployments like Afghanistan, where Canada's taking the lead on an international or cooperative mission, we're always very active with our international allies. And we've always got at least some troops that are consistently embedded with those organizations doing the business just about every day. So yeah, we're active. We're an active military. It's not a great sale to the Canadian people, I think, having a military if we're not employing them. And even recently with COVID-19 at the beginning of the summer, we deployed what was called Op Laser, which was the Canadian Forces response to COVID-19. Essentially, it was the establishment of staging areas so that we could provide assistance to other government agencies if they became overwhelmed. This is the role that you should come to expect from the Canadian Forces. We're here both domestically to assist in operations as necessary, or domestic assistance, and abroad in order to be the spear's tip of Canada's foreign policy, your voice. Does that work, Shannon?
Yes, yeah, that makes sense. And I know going back to just recently with the pandemic, we had a lot of our Canadian military in the long-term care homes in Ontario and Quebec, and just helping that way. So again, it's just kind of boots on the ground wherever you're needed and how you can offer assistance. And that varied training that you're constantly having is always preparing you for the unknown, whether it's the Arctic conditions and you're out there training just in case you're needed.
Shannon, if I
Yes.
may. Things that I was familiar with is a lot of folks don't realize that we assist the fisheries patrols with the aircraft and all that. They keep an eye on our shores. People just see them flying around, they're doing things. They also assist with drug interdiction. Our coastlines are pretty porous, so there are a lot of times when ships go out and they'll have RCMP officers and they'll go with that. Firefighters. I know I got training and put out a forest fire down east. That's when you're 18, 19 years old, that gets your adrenaline going. And the snowstorm that we had, the troops down east, so many people, they were thanking that the boys were showing up with the shovels because people couldn't get out of their house. And they found out good Newfoundland hospitality and all that. But that's what we train for, is aid to civil power. So the foreign things are the big things that the newsmen like to keep an eye on, but it's all the little things in the background that we do, that we're there and we're not. You know, we're not seen, we're not heard, but we're there, and that's what we train for. So that's about, yeah, we covered everything.
Just while we're, and everyone feel free to start putting your questions into the chat if you have any, and I'll make sure I relay them to Daryl and Charles. But just while we're waiting for some questions to come through, I know that both of your experiences, of course, have been very up and down in the military, and definitely some hard times and some good times. Do you have, whether it's a funny story or maybe a really positive experience that you had maybe overseas or here in Canada that you would like to share? And if you need a minute to think about that, that is okay.
You don't. I don't need a minute. I have one. I think about it every time. Okay. When I was in Cyprus, they had, of course, everywhere we seem to go, they got things that bite. They have snakes, they have scorpions, they have bugs and everything. So when I was in Cyprus, we were in our own quarters and we had a tree. And for some reason, every fly in the Cyprus loved hanging out in this tree. So all the chameleons from miles around, and we're not talking little chameleons, we're talking foot-long things like that, always head for it. So one day we're sitting there and I noticed this big chameleon, and they walked like that, like this. And I went out and I grabbed it. And if you know what the chameleon is, like this, and I brought it in, and a friend of mine was lying there on the couch, just in a pair of shorts, and unfortunately, Gaetan was very hairy. So I dropped the chameleon on his chest. I'm sorry, this shouldn't have done it, but you're young men and you're out. And I guess when Gaetan said, when I opened up, all I seen was this lizard with the eyes looking this way and that way, and he had hooked onto his hair. So Gaetan's running around the compound trying to get this lizard taken off. Unfortunately, you find not so nice ways to break up the monotony. That was funny, but I shouldn't have done it. And he told me later on very emphatically that I shouldn't have done it. But sometimes you just get so keyed, so bored, boredom sets in. You know, there's a whole lot of tension, and then there's a long period and then a whole lot of tension. Little things like that. It's not like pulling your sister's pigtails, you know, or put the old thing about this was something, and you know what? It broke up. It was a funny situation that just added to the overall good times that we had there. So I know I was out of line, but I sure did laugh.
Ways to inject that laughter and that positivity into your day.
Yep.
I had you know what, since it's open forum a little bit right now, I had a few points there on your presentation, Chuck. There's no life like it. I love this. You forgot the comma. There's always a joke in the Army when I was coming through. You forgot the comma. It's not there's no life like it. It's there's no life, comma, like it.
Yes.
Something
Sorry.
we all,
I should have paused. I
They
forgot to
train you
pause.
to be perfectionist in the military.
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. The dispatch riders in the Sinai, something that's neat that's starting to come out again is we're starting to reintroduce dispatch riders. They had gone the way, like we thought communications were all going to be over the air and mass digital with a huge, we were just going to own the air and the bandwidth. But no, we saw that there was a relevant need for dispatch riders again. And so that's coming back. We're starting to train people again to do that. I still think that what we ought to be doing is carrier pigeons with micro SDs. Because that makes sense.
So dispatch riders, if you could just explain that a little bit to us. Does that mean they're right in the vehicle?
It's a signals trade, and well, you did DR, right?
Yes. When I arrived in Cyprus, the easiest way to get any paper messages around was by dispatch rider. So you would leave your headquarters and you would go to this detachment, which could either, like the city of Cairo is huge. So you could spend half the day driving, delivering messages from the main camp to the UN headquarters. And then there was other ones that you went out, you could go from Cairo to Alexandria, Cairo to Ismailia, Cairo to Rabat, Cairo to Suez. So you were the delivery man, like the postman that brings your mail to your house. Well, I was the postman that brought your messages to your wherever you were in a vehicle. Now you can imagine 22-year-old young man with his own vehicle out of the country the first time. It was exciting. You don't realize how dangerous it was because you didn't think about it. The second and third tour, you thought about it. But the first one, oh, this is a blast. They gave me a vehicle. They say, away you go, you're on your own. It taught you independence, and it taught you to be careful. But it was an exciting. But you were basically, as Daryl said, it wasn't all comms like through the air and the internet and all that. This was, I would show up in the Jeep, give them their letters or the correspondence. They would give me their stuff. I would take it back to the headquarters, and that's it. And that's what I did.
So yeah, so there you go. And it hasn't changed much, literally. I think now we're using ATVs as well because we got rid of all of our motorcycles.
Yeah, too bad.
We just have a couple of questions coming and comments coming in through the chat. So Joe shared that she loved your presentations and learned a lot about your deployments. Incredible. The change of terrain, responsibilities, roles, and the pace must have been very hard. Now, Daryl, just to add on to that, when you look back at all of that training that you went through, and of course, when you're going through it, it was probably hard to see the end and maybe hard to understand why it was so long. But looking back now, you must understand, I guess, why all that training was so necessary.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't get lost on a single one of us. Yeah, of course, like I said, it's very high demand. And sometimes you need to sacrifice. Like in 2010, I wanted to go and deploy and do this job overseas. I wanted to. And so then I had to make a call. I had to make a call. I'm going to have to sacrifice a lot of my personal life, my free time in order to achieve this. And you have to make those sacrifices. And like I said, it's not easy. It's not a kind job, but there's tons of satisfaction in it. There's also a lot of misery, a lot of heartache. And I'll leave it there because I don't want to, I don't want to go too far with it.
Well, we have another, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. The time that I was separated from my family, total of my whole career, I calculated it was a little over 5 years. Deployed 3 years here, 1 year here, 18 months here with all the time. So you go figure, my contact with my family was when I came home for the 2 weeks. Here, you get 2 weeks, you can go home and you fly back. Or it was on the phone. We, not until the last posting I got where you could actually talk like we're doing now. It was on the phone. How you doing? But it was mainly letters. So the art of letter writing is something that I love because that's how you can express how things are going, how it comes back. So I'm a great lover of writing letters. This is nice, but I would like to sit down and put pen and paper. But the time that we spend away from our family is something I don't think most people that may be watching us can, but Daryl can understand that. we spend time away, but it's with what we decided that we're willing to do for our country. And so it gets a little low. So I remember my last tour, I came home and I'm, rah, 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 and you know, I was a squadron sergeant major. I wanted you to do something, you went and did it. I went home and my youngest son put me in my place. He said, Dad, that's not how we do it here. You speak to your mother or to mom. And I went, okay. But that, you're so fired up. And then when you get home, you got to learn to wind down. So I had to learn the home rules again. So, but
yes, definitely.
13-year-old son, yeah, he said, Dad, that's not what we do. So, but that's something that's being in the military is all about. You have to give to get, and that's what we're willing to do.
There are lots of, you know, so many sacrifices that you're making on a daily basis. We talk a lot in the media about the ultimate sacrifice, of course, but just a sacrifice in choosing to sign up and go on those tours, go overseas and be away from your families for so long. And it makes us understand how that brotherhood and that sisterhood, that family that the military becomes, how it becomes so strong, because they do become your family. You travel with them, you sleep with them, you eat with them, you train with them. So thank goodness for that brotherhood and that family that forms in the military.
And you depend on them is what you do. They are your family.
Tracy has a question. Do you know a lot of women soldiers? About what percentage of Canadian soldiers are women?
I'm just going to butt in. I married one. So I know one really personally. In my trade, TELOP was mainly half and half. So if we had 1,000 people in my trade, TELOP, we would have 500 women. Other trades, not so much, because in that time era, there was restrictions on women could be deployed. There was a lot of rules and regulations that were going then that would not be tolerated now. One, if you got married, you got pregnant, you were released on a medical condition. Go figure. There was other things like that. You could be posted, separated. I'd post me to BC, post my wife to St. John. But things started getting better and better. I'm saying 50% of my trade. It's getting better and better, which is smart, because if anybody says the women can't do the job, wrong. That just ain't so true. Those old-fashioned thinking rules have to go out. A soldier is a soldier. Tradesman is a tradesman. That's it. And that's how I always thought it should be. It was just the way I was trained, and I could never see it or tolerate treating someone different because of their male or female. Just can't do the job. Couldn't see it.
My colleague Lauren just shared a snapshot in the chat box there, a link to Stats Canada that will also give a better idea of female representation in the Canadian Armed Forces. So just going back up, Jill commented that she can't believe, you were separated from your wife for that long, for 5 years. And Amy is watching with her son, and he is 7 years old, and she's thanking you both for sharing your stories, very informative. And she would like to know how you were able to live in a bunker for 6 years.
That bunker was 8 hours a day, so it was 1/3 of a day. When you went into a shift, you went under 2 stories underground, and it was a communications complex that, unfortunately, during the Cold War, if there was a war coming, the provincial government would move from Toronto to Borden, and they would hunker down. It would be closed up, locked down, and it was set so the government could continue while the nuclear war was going on. And that's what it was for. And it would join to North Bay, and it would join to Carp, and then it would join to Colorado Springs. There was a network of big bunkers and little bunkers that would control what was going on during a nuclear conflict. So you would go in the morning, and I also must say, if you're claustrophobic, you wouldn't do the job. You go in and it would close the steel doors, locked everything down, run generators inside, everything was done. If you were claustrophobic, you just say, no, I need to do something else. But it was only like an 8 hour, 1/3 of the day. But you did it constantly. So you get used to it. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it got boring because you sound like you're in an engine all the time running, but that was it.
Chuck, I had a question for you. So you were talking about how the Legion, the Poppy campaign, what it's being used for, like you said, people need hearing aids, people need these items, and the Legion is providing those things. I find my generation, we have a really awkward, my generation seems to have a very awkward relationship with the Legion. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if it's because, is it VA that's getting better at providing us access to all these things? Or is it, is it a campaigning thing? What's going on here that is creating this kind of tension, or not tension, but it's just like I don't know what the tension here.
I can answer. I hope to try and answer that, if I may, Shannon. It could be a little complicated. I know, seriously, when I was in the military, the Legion did not affect me because I had the military. I had my unit, my mess. Daryl knows what mess is, a club. I had my friends. I did not, believe it or not, I did not associate with civilian world. It was not in my world. My world was the military. But when I left the military, as I was older, like I was 55 years old, I needed something to continue that comradeship, that familiarity. And I found that the Legion did. So I had a mindset of going in, okay, I'm ready to accept the Legion in its quirks, because there were some bad times where an old boys network, they call, and they thought the Legion was just a place to drink and howl, and they would not be coming in. Well, the new, and I wasn't new, but the new members coming in, we're working to change that. Those attitudes are gone. Any Canadian citizen in good standing can become a member of the Legion, whether you were in the military or not. It is a place, our main mission, and I keep saying, is to help our veterans and their families. And veterans are those who have served and retired, those who are currently serving, and those who may continue on. If the veteran is gone, we're still there to help their family. We don't stop that. That's the main mission. So you can't have restrictions. If I show up and say, I'd like to help, you please join us. But where we have some of the conflicts is, I think it's the old boy network. The people coming in had the experience and they got a bad taste in their mouth. Now we're really trying, we are advocates for anyone that wants us to be with the Veterans Affairs of Canada. We will fight on your behalf. We will do our damnedest. We'll get 3 redresses. There's a term I bet you haven't heard for a while. We have special service officers. That's what they do. They work 24 hours a day just supporting veterans, getting them the support they need, fight VAC, fight the government, and keep going. So the main thing is to be caring now, understanding, and don't send anybody away. And it's going to take some time. There are some folks that don't like us. I don't know why, but I will help anybody that comes to the front door and knocks on it and says, hi, I need help. So you need more guys like me.
Thank you for that detail.
And Charles, in addition to the work that the Legions do for the veterans, Legions are also staples of communities, and the fact that you do a lot for different community groups. So I know you make donations to the food bank. I know Family Transition Place has been recipients of your help. So Legions are, they're really working to get out into the community and see wherever there's a need and help, in the same way that our Canadian soldiers do around the world. They see a need and they go to it and they help.
That's what a community should do. If someone's in need, help. That's as simple as that. So you have a better society when everybody's doing good.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sorry, Shannon. I'm sitting here. I'm at the Legion, if anybody didn't know, and I have people peeking in the window wondering what I'm doing. So if I look away or something like that, they're being nosy. So I'll try to shoo them away.
And just feel free, everyone who's listening, to add any questions or comments that you have again in the chat. While we're waiting for any more questions to come in, I'll just share some of the questions that the Girl Guides wanted to ask of you, and they'll be watching your presentation tomorrow night as part of their virtual meeting. One of their research projects they were doing was looking into trench art, and they wondered if you knew anything about trench art that you could share with them.
I wish I had that question earlier, because sitting behind me, we have a lot of artifacts that have come from previous soldiers who served during, believe it or not, I have an article from the Boer War, from the Boer War all the way up. And there you go, me speaking proper English. there's a great deal of trench art sitting behind me, and I wish I'd known that, and I would have had some pieces. It's just fascinating what people sitting around with time in their hands will do with an expended shell or some cans or some wood or something, and they whittle and they build, and it's beautiful art. So yeah, sorry, I don't have the keys to it, or I'd sneak over and grab a piece and show you. But if you go to any Legion, whoever's asked the question, you can phone the Legion up. And before this pandemic, I used to have all the schools in the area phone me up, and I'd have the kids in here. So I'll bring them in anytime before 1 o'clock, and I've had them in the basement setting up displays. Bring them in here, and I should bring out all the stuff that our past soldiers and airmen and sailors brought back to Canada, and they get to look at it. Some they can handle, some they can see. I have postcards from 1914. I have letters between a brother and his sister, 1915. Like I said, I have the art. They take artillery shells and they just make it. They also whittle. They were the greatest bunch of whittlers I ever seen. They could do more with a knife and a piece of something than you ever could see. So it's fascinating to see what.
Well, that's good to know that all of that is available there, and that after the pandemic, because it is going to end soon, we hope, there'll be an opportunity for children, well, for all of us to come in and to see those and take a look at them.
You betcha. If anybody is in the Orangeville area and this thing's over, if you want to come in, you call the Legion here, and they'll get a hold of me, and I'll talk to the Sergeant at Arms, because he has all the keys, and we set it up, and we'll come in and you can have it, and you can hang around as long as you want.
There's just a few more comments that have come through in the chat. Tracy has shared, "Thank you so very much, Charles and Daryl, for sharing your incredible stories. Such an informative afternoon. You have truly left a positive mark in our lives in so many ways. Merci." And Amy has shared, "My kids appreciate the personal photos and the details of the conditions. We are homeschooling and we've been learning about the importance of Remembrance Day, so we're glad we were able to listen today. Many thanks."
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And Kathy has shared that she misses all of the events at the Legion.
Yes, it's we have a motto. We're the Legion with a big. We're the small Legion with a big heart, and that's how we try to live. We want to be a part of the community. The pandemic has slowed us down, but we're still going. We're going to be here for a while. We're not going away, and as I said, hopefully next year we won't have the Winchester Arm to visit anymore, but we can sit around and I want to have a drink. Sorry, folks, and wish everyone well and welcome everybody back, and have to go from there. You just got to keep your sense of humor, keep smiling, keep moving, and we'll do all right. That's just in our nature as Canadians. We'll do all right.
I'm just thinking if I had any more questions here written down for you. I guess I'll just touch briefly before we wrap up on PTSD. So I know we hear a lot about the soldiers coming back with PTSD and how they're being helped through that. And Charles, you were saying that our soldiers can go to the Legion to get assistance. And Daryl, you mentioned the VA, which is Veterans Affairs, for those of us who weren't aware. But if you maybe could just speak to that and to how maybe we as a society can help support them, but also the support that they're getting.
I can speak a little bit to this, Charles.
Oh, and so, I should have explained that PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder for the little ones who are watching, and that's some of the shock that our soldiers experience when they're in the military and how they cope with that when they get home.
Yeah, well, and cope with it, I would say, for a while. It depends on how it's addressed. I was actually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder over this summer, and to be honest, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about myself, about what I was valuing, why, and how I was able to. What's really neat is how I was able to kind of exist and actually kind of do well, especially in the military, but have this. Like I was always, like I'm very wound up. I'm very agitated. I get very, very anxious, and I'm ready to snap. Well, it turns out as a sergeant, as a senior NCO in the military, these are perfect qualities, absolutely perfect qualities. And so what I was able to do was actually take this, what was a functional like impairment, and use it in order to continue a sort of career. But they got really bound up, and yeah, it caused me. It's, you know, it's a tough thing. I don't think that there are any soldiers who've gone overseas and been impacted, and it's not even just the combat or ripping, you know, devices out of the ground. You know, everybody expects an EOD guy to be like, explosives everywhere. But you know what? It's not even just that, and the imminent threat of danger. But like Charles was saying, you go to somewhere like the Sinai, and especially 20, 30 years ago, where social conditions were really, really bad. And what you're looking at is you're looking at a world of poverty all around you all the time. And then you come back here, and there's a Starbucks, and there's a McDonald's. There's even the poorest, the absolute poorest of us have a far better quality of life than anyone that we've just been interacting with for years. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to just be happy with that, to not want to get out there again and start actually doing something to fix a situation that becomes so present. I apologize, I'm getting very passionate. I'm going to take a deep breath, grind my teeth for a bit.
But it does, Daryl, it does describe that there is a transition period there, and it could be a very long transition period, but that it's not possible to do what you do and then just come back to civilian life as if none of that happened. And I mean, in our regular day-to-day jobs where we're not facing danger and risk, there's a struggle for people to leave work at work and then to go home to the family. But in your situation, it is so different. And those experiences, even the relationships that you form with the people and the different cultures that you're working with every day stick with you for a lifetime. And it's how do you keep all of those memories and keep all of that, but also still transition into our society. I could just imagine.
If I may, Shannon, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just want to add what Daryl said about that, going to places and seeing the abject poverty and the humanity and all that, and you come home and you see what we have. And then I hope this isn't taken the wrong. And then you hear people complaining about what they have here in Canada and how they're treating. And sometimes you get so frustrated, you said, I'd just like to take 2 or 3 of them with me. And next time I'm deployed, I would like you to come along, sit there and be an observer. And then when you get back to Canada, if you don't get down in the damn ground and kiss that ground and say, I'm got to live in the best country in the world. I know we all have the problems, but you ain't got the problems that they do. And it's the frustration, because in the military, Daryl, we took an oath. I promised to serve Her Majesties and their heirs, and I won't go the whole thing, but to the duly elected government of the government. It didn't matter who it was, Liberals, Conservatives, NDP. So away I went. I kept my mouth shut. I did my job. I did my duty. And I came home. And then when you hear some of the complaints, in my mind, were so frivolous to compare what when you see young children playing in mud fields or going through minefields and things like that, that's scary. We have problems here, but not like over there. When you could turn the wrong corner and that's death. You could step down someplace, it's death. You could move a picture that was off tilted and that's death. You could step on a stair that's broken and you hop over it and the next one is booby trap. That's death. That's the real world away from our nice, I call it nice comfy country. So please enjoy what you've got. We can square things away, but if you ever run into the two of us and we hear and we're going, now you know why we're doing that. Thank you.
So you have a great sense of gratitude for everything that we have in Canada. And I think it's important to recognize that both of you play a role in that, and our Canadian soldiers play a role in that, and not only ensuring our safety, but that you're overseas and helping to ensure the safety of other communities. It's a huge weight to burden, and thank you for doing that and for serving our country and for doing it so well.
I have a good family. My family, my wife and my children and all that, I have a good, stable background. That's what you need when you want to come home. My last deployment, when I landed, I was a little embarrassed because people in the airplane got up and clapped. I landed in Ottawa. You're trying to get through the terminal, and everybody's clapping because all of a sudden everybody was showing their appreciation, and you just didn't know how to. Okay, what's going on? Like, but that was something that I really appreciated because someone said, "Hey, they're thanking us for what we're doing." I considered it my job, but they considered it something else special. There we go.
And for me, Shannon, what I want to say is honestly thank all of you. There's nothing that can more quickly drive the morale of the troops that are actually overseas doing the job than when the country starts to question our involvement in a mission or whether we should be there. It's great. Eventually, we ought to sit down and have those questions. But wait till the troops are back home, because when you're on the field and if the public opinion isn't with you, it's super demoralizing. So at the end of the day, it's thank you, every Canadian citizen, for the support that you've given us and continue to give us through the years.
And one last thing I'm going to put in here.
Yes.
Daryl and I don't want to speak for him, I consider myself military. I don't consider, we have a thing. I know life. More than half my life was spent in the military. So till the day I die, whether I'm in a uniform or not, I'm still a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm a citizen of the country, but I'm still hardcore military. It's the way I dress, my deportment, my attitude, my speech, which has been pretty good. And see, now those two are laughing and they know what I mean. But it's just, they raised me. I was an 18-year-old kid who thought he knew everything, about a foot away from being a bad kid and all that. And the military groomed me and taught me discipline and gave me a life. So that's where I am now, and I can never change it. As was said, I thank the public for supporting the military. Sometimes we get put in some pretty crappy places, but if we have your support, we'll do the job. We don't have to worry about what's going on back at home. You got to worry about what's out there. Anyway, thank you kindly. Appreciate it.
No, thank you both. And if there are any last questions or comments that you want to share in the chat, go ahead. But based on what everyone is saying, I think everyone's just so thankful for your service and thankful that you took the time out today to share your stories with us, because it's not always easy. And, you know, in sharing your stories with us now, we can go on and share those stories and, you know, just not only keep that memory alive, but just keep that awareness going that we do have Canadian soldiers stationed all over the world right now. And we do have veterans at our legions waiting to help both our soldiers and our communities. And the more we talk about that, the more we can educate others on the role that our Canadian Armed Forces plays in Canada and everywhere else. Just one last comment from Jo. She said, "This has been wonderful. Thank you."
You're quite welcome. Yeah, that was, you know what? I was a little nervous about doing this, but this is really nice to be able to sit and have a chat.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yep.